All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our professional development webinar. We're going to get started shortly. And we have 3 different speakers today, including myself, that will be talking about different professional development tips. So thank you so much for joining us. So we'll get started. Just to let you know what we're going to cover today. This is our agenda. So first, we will start by introducing our Study Hall College Consulting team, who's going to be talking to you today. And then we'll go over our services really briefly. And then we'll hop into finding jobs and internships with David, getting resume advice with Navia, and then I'll give you some interview advice. And we will also leave time for questions. If you have anything you want to ask any one of our speakers or in general, you can ask questions at the end, and we'll have some final remarks to kind of wrap everything up. So once again, thank you for joining us. We're excited to share our expertise with you, and we hope you get a lot out of it. And just a note as well, if you attend this session until the end and you complete our attendance form, which we'll give you at the end, you're going to receive 10% off your next Study Hall College Consulting purchase if you're here live. So again, thanks for joining us, and we'll get started. First, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Sarah, like I mentioned, and I am from the class of 2020 from UC Berkeley. I majored in architecture and minored in Spanish language and literature. And currently I work at M-Train, which is a workplace culture training job. It's a remote job, and I'm a client success manager currently. And also a product specialist as well. So kind of going into product design. My hometown is Lafayette, California, which is kind of like the East Bay area. And in terms of my work and internship experience, which I know you all are interested in here, again, my client success manager and product specialist role, that's my current role right now. But at UC Berkeley, I held a few different roles as a student. So I was their virtual engagement coordinator. That means I created all of the virtual presentations during COVID. When people couldn't visit the campus, we would give presentations virtually for everyone. So I coordinated that, as well as Cal Day, which is Cal's annual Admitted Students Day. And I was also a part of the leadership team as a campus ambassador. So I got a lot of training and expertise during my time as a student and learned to balance a lot of things at once. And then I also had an internship during my time in college at San Francisco International Airport as a design trainee. And so that's a little bit about myself and my experience, and I'll pass it along to David to introduce himself.
Hey guys, I'm David. I also graduated from Berkeley, class of 2021. Actually just graduated this past December. Majored in economics, minored in data science, and I transferred from UCSB to Berkeley in fall 2019, which feels like a million years ago, but it was just like 2 years ago, which is kind of crazy. Hometown San Jose, California. In terms of my work and internship experience, a lot of my experience comes in the tech industry in kind of business related roles. So back in 2019, I interned at Cisco as a business analyst intern. And then in 2020, I interned at Nutanix as a business operations and strategy intern. And this coming March, I'm going to start working at Adobe as an associate consulting. So definitely a lot of experience in the kind of tech business world.
Hi, everyone. I'm Navia. I also went to Berkeley, just graduated this past year, class of 2021 in May. I did a double major in public health and molecular cell biology, all on a pre-med track. Currently, I'm working as a medical assistant and a scribe at a private practice here in San Francisco, while also applying to medical school. I grew up on the East Coast, but I did go to high school in Dublin, California, which is just about 30 minutes from Berkeley. My work and internship experience is very science, kind of medicine focused, a little bit different than Sarah and David. I worked in a couple different nonprofits, most recently one called Reach Sharati, which is a nonprofit based in Tanzania. So I interned for them for about a year or so. The summer after my freshman year of college, I did a research internship at Sandia National Laboratories out in Livermore, California. And then after I did that internship, I continued to do research through the Ross Wilson Lab at the Innovative Genomics Institute. So again, a lot of my work experience kind of focuses around the sciences, but hopefully if any of you are interested in that stuff, you'll get a different take from me.
Awesome. So now that you've met all 3 of us, before we dive into our main agenda for today, a little bit about our services as Study Hall College Consulting. So first we offer essay review services. So we will review your common application, supplemental essays, letter of continued interests, and UC personal insight questions. So during the application cycle, if you're thinking you want someone to read over your essays to give you really detailed feedback about what we think you could do better or what we're kind of gaining from your essay, you can reach out to us and we will review that for you. And, you know, like I mentioned, how we review essays, it's holistic yet detailed. So we will give you that detailed information about how you can kind of make your story stronger. But specifically, we'll give you a thorough analysis of your story, grammar, vocab, and thesis, and how to best present yourself. So what story are you telling and what are you really conveying to the admissions officers? We'll also give you a paragraph explanation of how to improve. So you can really get a detailed reason as to why we think these things. And then we'll give you detailed suggestions. So both subjective and objective improvements. Always when we review essays, it's always our opinion. You can take it if you want to, but we really want to give you the tools to really improve your essay and put your best foot forward. So that's our essay review overview. And then in terms of coaching calls, we also will hop on a call with you and really talk out any issue or any questions that you might have about the process. So you can ask us questions about, you know, our high school and college experiences, our application journey, what tips we have, what we wish we would have known. And we can work together to brainstorm essay ideas, create college lists. That's a really big one. So kind of weighing options of where you want to go. It can be a big picture essay discussion. So what are you trying to achieve with your essay and how you can get there? And we can also help you fill out the extracurricular activity section. So that's always a tedious section to fill out. And or you can talk about, you know, our college, you can ask us about our college experience, get advice about college schedules, planning all of that, getting housing, joining clubs, finding internships. And some of our consultants also offer tutoring as well. So if you're looking to get some more academic help in that sense, we also offer that opportunity. We'll also allow you to have a free 15-minute consultation with our consultants, just in case, you know, so you can meet us and kind of see where we're coming from and get an idea of how we review your essays and how we can help you. So without further ado, we will jump into our first presenter. So David will talk about internship and job search advice. So take it away, David.
Cool, thank you. I think we just go to the next slide. Cool. So just a quick agenda. So I'm going to be talking about two main things in terms of what I found helpful for the job and internship search. So number one, using online resources to their full potential. So platforms like LinkedIn, Indeed, and Google Chrome extensions. And then secondly, getting referrals. So doing this by joining student orgs and reaching out to people in the industry and the kind of companies that you want to work for, reaching out to those people for coffee chats. So using online tools. So I'm sure everybody on this call has been on like LinkedIn, Handshake, Indeed, and, you know, kind of just started applying to everything that we saw, you know, in that kind of desperate, you know, push to find an internship right before the summer. And obviously just applying to a bunch of jobs, it can be effective sometimes just by the sheer number. But, you know, blindly just applying to everything that you see isn't always the most efficient or effective. Personally, I found that in order to kind of make the job search really effective, it's really important to actually make a personal connection with people like recruiters and hiring managers, and actually tell them personally why you're really interested in the specific role and really get your name out in front, because obviously thousands of people are applying to these jobs, and it's really important to establish that kind of personal connection so that you stand out a little bit more. And I'm going to talk about a couple of ways that you can do that through a couple of these online tools. So first, obviously LinkedIn. I think this one's pretty obvious. Messaging on LinkedIn with LinkedIn Premium. A big pro of this is that obviously it's super easy to find recruiters and the kind of positions that they're recruiting for. But the thing I found with LinkedIn is that since obviously every recruiter is on LinkedIn and everybody is looking for the same kind of jobs, a lot of recruiters will tend to kind of ignore LinkedIn messages for jobs that are in super high demand, at least in comparison to personalized emails to the actual recruiters. So that's definitely one con. And then another con is obviously that there's a limited free trial and LinkedIn Premium can get kind of expensive. So my next couple of kind of I guess ideas or platforms are kind of alternatives to just messaging on LinkedIn. This is a service that's a Google Chrome extension, and it actually allows you to find emails through LinkedIn profiles. And from there, you can actually just, directly email the recruiters and tell them personally about your interest rather than just being another LinkedIn message or just being another application. So a big pro to adapt for LinkedIn, the Google Chrome extension, is that there is no guessing. You just need to find their LinkedIn page, and it actually gives you a probability of the email being correct. And usually it's pretty high. Cons, this is an extension for Chrome only. So if you use Safari, you might just have to jump onto Chrome for a little bit to use this. It also requires a viewable LinkedIn profile. Typically, this isn't a problem because pretty much all recruiters will obviously have viewable LinkedIn profiles. And there's also a limited number of free uses. But when I've used it, I don't know, it says there's a limited number of free uses, but it's never run out for me. I don't know if that's a bug, but yeah. And Rocket Reach. So this is looking for more high profile kind of people within companies. And I think this is more helpful for if you're interested in maybe startups and you're looking to kind of contact maybe people higher up at those startups to kind of personally tell them your interest in a role. You're probably not going to get a response from, like Jeff Bezos or anyone like that. Big kind of pro of Rocket Reach is that you can find email addresses, obviously for high level people, very helpful for startups, like I said. And again, just like the previous kind of platform, it tells you just how certain it is that the email address is actually correct. Cons, again, this is also limited. This actually does have a limited number of uses, so definitely be aware of that. And the person does need to have a LinkedIn or some kind of social media presence so that this service is actually able to find the emails of these people. So yeah, definitely really important, I think, in terms of sticking out in a sea of applicants, to really address these recruiters as personally as you can through emails. That's how I've mostly went about recruiting, and I definitely found a lot more success doing that and actually getting responses from recruiters than just just applying to everything that I saw on Handshake, LinkedIn, Indeed, etc. So hopefully these kind of services are helpful when you want to reach out to these kind of people. My second big tip is getting referrals. And I think this is by far the easiest way to get an interview. Like I said, and I've been kind of talking about throughout, it's really important to stick out, right? And by getting a referral, you basically put yourself in front of everybody else in line. And it really just gives you a lot more priority in terms of actually getting that interview, so you can actually show the company what you're about. Of course, getting referrals isn't always the easiest thing, but I think there's definitely a lot of ways that, a lot of different avenues you can look for to make that process a lot easier for yourself. So personally, the way I've got most of my referrals is by joining student orgs. So even if it's not somebody, even if it's not a club that's not directly related maybe to the field that you're interested in, just meeting a lot of people and meeting kind of like-minded people, it's really valuable personally. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be working at Adobe this coming March, and I was able to get that job because I got a referral from somebody that I worked with in my freshman year in a student org. So it's definitely very, very helpful. And I'm super glad that I joined that org, obviously, because it kind of led to my full-time offer. And also setting up coffee chats. This is super important as well. Really just, getting your foot into the industry, making sure that you're talking to people within the companies that you're interested in, talking to people within the industry, and, kind of asking them about their day-to-day life, really showing an interest in the role. And hopefully that leads to you asking them whether they could potentially refer you or not. And more likely than not, these people are more than happy to help, especially people who graduated from your college as well. So yeah, I think that's all of my advice. And definitely, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in a chat or anything like that, and we can answer them at the Q&A at the end. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, David. So now we'll move to Navya and her resume advice.
Hey again. So I'm going to talk to y'all a little bit of some of my resume sort of tips and tricks, most things that I've received in the last few years. So first we'll talk about how to get organized. A resume is kind of this like conglomeration of all the stuff that you've done thus far. So first you want to kind of collect all that information. So we'll talk about what you might want to include in that data. Next, I'll give you some examples of different styles and layouts that you can choose from. Definitely visual appeal is part of the resume process. You know, the content is of course the most important thing, but the way that that's presented is also very important for people reading the resume. And then finally, we'll just talk a little bit about how you can adjust your resume accordingly and some other sort of tips that kind of varies case by cases. So first, getting organized. Just as I said, the first thing you want to do is compile all of your data. So you could, for example, look around at other people's resumes. You can go on Google and look at different people's resumes to kind of get an understanding of what information you want to include in the first place. Definitely some baseline stuff, definitely education. So where did you go to school? What time period, what dates, months, years did you go to that school? You can use your transcripts to write down your GPA. Sometimes, you know, it's relevant to write down your science GPA if you're more science oriented, or maybe you're in the like, you know, computer science route, you want to include your computer science GPA. So kind of compile that metric information. Next, you might want to consider some publications, honors, awards. So if you were like myself, science related, you could include any research publications that you've had. You can include any honors that includes like high honors or highest honors or something if you had that at your undergrad university or college. Any other honors in your, you know, club organizations or city involvement or extracurriculars, things like that. Similarly, any awards that you might have won, like those are the kind of like first things that you can include at the top. That's what I kind of did on my resume, including the education and kind of big flashy sort of stuff at the top. And then you can kind of go into the more dense information. So make a list of all the volunteer activities you've done, any hobbies, interests, extracurriculars, club organizations that you're a part of, internships that you did, work experience. For all of those things, you want to include the organization that it was for, or the company or the group. You want to include the dates that you were there. And just for the sake of compiling data, like try to write up like a 1 to 2 sentence summary. Depending on how you organize your resume, you may or may not have space to actually include that one sentence summary, but just to sort of have it, I found that that was really helpful. Frankly, it was kind of a way for me to figure out what was actually important or relevant to my resume, what was maybe not so relevant. You know, if I was talking about some minor thing that I did freshman year, but I'm applying for a full-time job 4 years later that has nothing to do with that, I might want to omit it. So kind of use that as like a practice run. I found that to be really helpful. And I might have already mentioned this, but any skills or hobbies or interests, the skills section is one area where you can make it more focused if you'd like. So if you're, you know, more science data driven, you can say the different languages that you're proficient in. You can say, you know, kind of general personal stuff about yourself. I'm like, you know, compassionate, I'm driven, I'm, you know, focused in this area. Or if you're, you know, science heavy, you can talk about the different lab skills that you have. You can talk about different people skills that you have. Or if you're medically inclined like myself, you can say, oh, hey, like I had experience working with electronic medical records. So this is kind of one of the more ambiguous areas that's really up to you. You'll probably have very limited space for this. So you want to choose, definitely, I would say at least 5 or so skills. Those skills can include like straight up skills, or it can be, you know, hobbies, interests, or things that, you know, you do outside of the classroom setting or work setting. So again, for all of these more activity type stuff, make sure you have a timeline for dates that you have. And again, try to write up a 1 to 2 sentence description for the activity portion as well. So next, once you have all that data, you want to figure out how you actually want to present it. I was always told that less is better. I was told to kind of aim for 1 page or maybe 2 pages, depending on the thing that you're applying for. I would say you could try for 1 page for all of the main information, and maybe the second page is something that's more specific to the thing that you're applying for. So for example, if you're applying to something in the research world, like maybe you want to have your baseline 1-page resume, and then as a secondary page, you can include all of the different publications or projects that you worked on kind of in depth, or similarly, if you have, specific work experience related to the thing that you're applying for, maybe you use that extra page for that. And then we'll talk about some other things also you can add as a second page, but I was always taught to do one page. Again, make sure you just double check with your field to see if that's common practice, but that's kind of what I've been told. In general, you want to avoid too many or any photos or graphics in general. I know some people like to include a picture of themselves on the resume. I personally don't, but you're welcome to do that if you'd like. Any graphics or things that can kind of cloud the actual data of the resume, you want to avoid unless it's relevant to your field. Like if you're an art student or you're applying to an art practice or an art residency or something like that, maybe you want to include something more artsy. Again, that part is like really ambiguous, and you just kind of have to use your best judgment to figure out what you should include there. But definitely the bulk of the resume should be the words and selling yourself on the information that you've presented on it. So based on some of the data that we talked about in the previous slide, you can then come up with some headers that you're thinking about. So definitely baseline, you want to have your name and you want to have your contact information. So personally on mine, I have my name, I have my email address, I have my home address, and I have my phone number. You don't have to include all of those things. I know not everyone likes to include their home address. I honestly just did that because I wanted 3 things for the sake of like having an aesthetically centered thing under my name, but just kind of play around with that. One thing I didn't actually add to my resume until a couple of years ago was like a 1 to 2 sentence overview right underneath your name. So for mine, it's something like, I'm interested in minimizing health disparities in underserved populations through public health and medical initiatives, something like that. And it says like, I'm interested in pursuing a MD MPH dual degree program. So you can kind of adjust that as you see fit, or if you're working for a full-time job, if you're applying for a degree program or a residency program, whatever that might be, you can adjust that 1 to 2 sentence thing to your liking. So this is kind of serving as like a profile, like introduction sort of, so people get a just general idea of what you're interested in. Often if companies or programs ask for a cover letter, you expand on that obviously in like a couple of paragraphs, but having it on the resume is kind of nice. And I've been told that it helps people take you a little bit more seriously because you're putting into like a concise sentence what exactly it is that you're hoping to achieve. Next, underneath that, the way that you order the rest of this is totally up to you. Some people like to include the education stuff at the bottom. Like I said, for me, I have mine kind of at the top of my resume. So the names of the schools that you attended, the GPA, other relevant distinctions, or the name of your degree program is often helpful. You also want to include, I got honors in this degree, or I got, magna cum laude, summa cum laude, if that applies to you. Then you can try honors and awards. That's what I have on mine. Then you can have experiences. So personally on mine, I split up my experiences with like extracurriculars as one heading, and then like work/internship/relevant experiences to like medicine science world as another heading. Just because I did a lot of stuff in undergrad that wasn't necessarily directly relevant to science and medicine, but still important to me and still something that I wanted to show. So I did like voluntary/extracurriculars as one, and then I have work experience as another. So for those, for the most part, I tried to do a 1 sentence overview for each one of them. Not even 1 sentence. Some of them are probably just like a few words. This really depends on the amount of stuff that you have on your resume. If you would rather include a long list of the things that you've done because you think that's important, you can do that and sort of cut out the space that comes with the 1 sentence. Or you can minimize the number of experiences to the things that might be more relevant, or maybe you spent the most time doing and you think would be most valuable. Include those, and then maybe add that 1 sentence caption sort of underneath. So I did the name of the title that I had, the name of the organization, the time period with which I was part of that organization, and then a caption to go with it. And then at the bottom, I have a section about skills. So again, this can be technical stuff like, I'm proficient in R programming and Python and JavaScript, or it can be, I have had experience with electronic medical records like I've done for myself, or I also have something like the different sort of bio or chemistry or physics laboratory experiences that I have. You can also kind of milk your degree a little bit. Like in my skills section, I have something along the lines of the fact that I'm proficient in public health discipline. So I wrote like, oh, I've learned the sort of nitty gritty details about community health and epidemiology and health policy. So for me, that was kind of relevant. And then at the bottom of my skills section, I do also have a couple of like hobbies and interests. So I wrote that I like to learn instruments. I wrote that I like to do, yoga, and I like to cook. Sometimes that's relevant and you have space to do that. It's okay if you don't, but I found that the places where I did include that in my resume, they do actually ask me about it. So there was one time someone asked me like, oh, hey, what do you like to cook? I saw that you wrote that on your resume. So sometimes that can be fun, make you look a little bit more humane instead of a robotic sort of lens of who you are. But those are some possible headers that you might want to include. And this is kind of the general layout of how I have my resume. So next, I pulled a few different templates. My biggest pro tip for resume crafting is to use Canva. Canva is free. You can get Canva Pro to get some of the more fancy stuff, but a lot of the good stuff is also free. I use Canva to make my resume. Some people choose to, just kind of use Microsoft Word or something to make their resume, and that's completely fine. But I like to have a little bit of fun. As I said, you want to try to avoid too many graphics and too much, messy sort of cloudy graphics that can kind of take away from the actual data that you're including there. But I thought these were some of the more cleaner resumes that I found, just to kind of make your resume look a little bit more professional, a little bit, nicer, a little bit more upscale than just kind of writing the data. And I really like Canva because they have all of these sections listed out. Like what I put for you here, I literally copy pasted from Canva. I didn't change anything. So even if you don't take away anything else from what I'm saying in this, talk, you could just go to Canva and basically everything is written out here. Honestly, my resume was like completely built off of this. So just kind of looking at some of these, as I said, you can include your contact information, and you'll see like the one on the left says profile, and they have like a 1 to 2 sentence summary about who they are. Similar thing in the middle one, it says like about me. So that's an option. The one in the middle also includes the skills as like a bullet point thing, and they also include language, which I thought was cool. And then you can see they all have education kind of in a different location, as well as experiences and things like that. So much of this is completely up to you and how you want to lay it out. But I think Canva's a great place to just kind of switch things around, because it's really easy to just like copy paste and shift it around and see what might look good where. So definitely huge tip, use Canva. They have got to be like 50 different layouts that you can choose from, and you can change the colors and stuff too. So definitely recommend that. And then finally, just some extra tips and tricks. I've kind of alluded to this, but you can totally adjust your resume accordingly. I have one like baseline resume that I always have ready on hand, but I have different versions of it for different programs. So I had one to include when I was doing my applications to medical school, and I had a kind of different, more adjusted one when I was applying to jobs. So this really depends on what you're applying for. So you can, one of the biggest things that you can change is that overview sentence, that profile, like about me section, that you can change, like either A, I'm looking to pursue this degree, or B, I'm looking to find a job opportunity in this space. You can definitely combine those things, but an option is to split them up and have sort of 2 resumes for that. Similarly, the skills section, obviously that's a little bit self-explanatory. One skill is more pertinent to one job versus another skill is more pertinent to another job, but you don't have space to include both. You can kind of pick and choose. And then similarly, all the experiences. So you don't have to include all the experiences. I think in general, quality over quantity really matters. So if you're trying to include all the information that you did for research stuff, you might need an extra page or something to include that. So that's one thing to consider. And then just another sort of general tip, spell check. I think a lot of people take this for granted, but I'm awful with spelling. I don't even realize when I'm making the spelling mistake if that like squiggly thing didn't show up underneath my words. So always spell check. I use like a Chrome tool called Grammarly. So this is really helpful to just quickly check my misspellings and change words accordingly. And then finally, kind of going along with the adjusting your resume thing, you can always add an extra section at the bottom or in the corner that, XYZ thing is available upon request. So I have something like this specifically for references. So I wrote like, oh, references are available upon request. If you're a writer and you're applying to like journals or magazines or something, you can say writing samples available upon request. Or if you're a design student, art student, design art portfolios available upon request. So again, so much of this is completely up to interpretation, completely up to how you want to present yourself. But hopefully these tips and tricks sort of helped you out.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Navya. So now we'll move on to my interview advice. And so hopefully this should kind of tie together some of the information you learned from David and from Navya to kind of wrap things up for you. So interviews. So what I'm going to cover first would be the purpose of interviews and types and formats that you might run into. Then we'll go on to preparation, best practices, common questions that are asked in interviews, the idea of imposter syndrome and keeping a healthy mindset throughout your interview. And then also follow-ups and manners that you should maintain for interviews. And then lastly, what do interviewers owe you? What should you be expecting out of the interview, and how do you evaluate a mutual best fit when you're in that interview? So first, the purpose of interviews. So interviews are largely a conversation, and they really should be an opportunity for you to present yourself as the best candidate, but also to learn about the job and to learn about your employer. And so you should get just as much out of this interview as the employer is getting out of it. And so you can learn if the job is the best fit for you and your career goals, what you're interested in, and see if you have the skills that they need at that time. Internships can be a little bit different as well. They can have a lot of the same goals, but a lot of times the employer is seeing if they can offer you a valuable learning experience, if you think it's something that's going to benefit you and your career goals. That's the big thing about internships is internships should always be for your learning benefit. That's the purpose of them. And so it's really the opportunity to see if you have a foundation, have some of those beginner skills and an interest in the job and kind of a willingness to learn and that passion that they're looking for. So in terms of types and formats, this varies, depending on which stage in the interview process you're in or which job you're really looking for. But generally, you can have an informational interview versus a job-focused one. So job focused is kind of the traditional one where you're going to an employer, you're looking for a job, and you're laying out, you're developing your resume, laying out all of your skill set, everything like that. Informational interviews are a little bit different. And David touched on this briefly. It's kind of those coffee chats where you're looking for someone that you are interested in, their experience or what they have to say. You want to ask them questions about their role, or you're interested in the company and it's someone at that company. So for those interviews, they're not geared towards you necessarily getting a job right away, but it's really to maybe get another referral or learn more about that process. So they could be a little bit more informal, but still you want to be respectful and follow a lot of the same kinds of guidance that I'll give you. Now there's a difference between remote and in-person jobs. And so that can vary heavily. And so remote, you're usually going to be on Zoom. It could be with a few different people. It could be with just one person versus in person. You're actually getting to see where you might work in person. You're getting to see the office and maybe meet different folks. So that can change the dynamic. Group versus one-on-one interviews. A lot of times they will have, people who would be your coworkers hop in on the interview, or it could be just they have an interview team that they've set up to ask you questions. And it could be one-on-one. So you might just interview with your potential boss or the recruiter or something like that. And then technical versus qualitative. So technical interviews, a lot of times if you are applying for a technical role, so maybe CS, for example, computer science, a lot of times those interviews are going to be technical. They're going to be asking you about specific skills or certain things that you should have learned in school to kind of give you that foundation. They might ask you to do a math problem on the spot, or they might ask you scenario questions or things like that. Versus qualitative, a lot of times those questions will be about you as a person. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Tell me about yourself. So they're kind of, different in that sense and require different preparation. And then in terms of, what job you're going after, you could be looking for an entry-level role or an internship or a skilled and specialized role. And so entry level, a lot of times is going to have more qualitative questions. So asking about yourself and your foundation and what you're looking for, versus skilled and specialized, they're going to expect you to have experience. They're going to expect you to really know what you're talking about in terms of, whether it's a technical question they've asked or whether it's a scenario. There's a little bit more that's expected from you. Internship, again, is that learning experience. So that differs in that sense. In entry-level jobs and internships oftentimes can have similar questions where you might want to have a foundation, but it's more about yourself and what you want to get out of it. In terms of preparing for your interview, so you always want to prepare before an interview. You never want to go in, not really having thought about the job or the employer, and that might, go without saying for you, but you really want to feel confident going into it. And that's going to help you think on, off the top of your head and not have to feel like you need to write everything down beforehand and memorize what you're going to say. Usually it's going to be much better if you've prepared so you feel confident and you can have a conversation with them. So preparing your elevator pitch is a really great way to prep for an interview. And that would be, your elevator pitch is basically a really short way of describing yourself, what you can do, what you're interested in, and make it really concise. And so the reason why I say this is great prep is you can sit down, days ahead of time, pull out a piece of paper and just write down, 3 sentences about yourself, 4 sentences about yourself, and really get it down and try to figure out what the most succinct and clear way is to describe yourself and what you're looking for. You can also generate a brainstorming document. And I do this before all of my interviews. I list a lot of the top challenging questions that I expect to get from them. And I write out my answers to them. So I can learn how to talk about myself, and kind of going into it, I have some talking points that I can use. I'm not memorizing it, but I kind of know where I might be going with that answer. So in those answers, you want to try to practice balancing confidence and humility. So you want to, talk about what you know. You want to really say, you are the best person for that job, and you want to explain why that's the case. But you don't want to just keep bragging about your accomplishments. You really want to talk about how you're great in a team, or what you've learned, or maybe things that you have yet to learn and you really want to. So try to, be approachable, but also don't sell yourself short in a lot of these questions. One thing I always love to do is that, if you're ever asked about your weaknesses, frame it as, room for improvement. So strengths and room for improvement, not kind of, things that you might be lacking on in this moment, because you can always learn and grow from where you are right now. And then especially if they provide you with the names of your interviewers or any information about the role, the company beforehand, definitely take that to heart and do some research. Go out on your own, look at their website, look at those contacts on LinkedIn, and look at their mission, their job focus, any recent news that you can talk about. And that's really just for you to have a good foundation. But also a lot of times they're going to ask you why you want to work there specifically. So you really want to have a good answer to that question, just because that really shows that you're interested in the role. If you don't have an answer, why are you there in the interview in the first place? So it's really important to know that. And then brainstorming questions to ask at the very end is really important as well. So this is a great way to show that you're engaged and that you are interested in that role. And I would say, try to never end an interview just saying, I don't have any questions. I don't really want to know anymore. There's always something that you can ask, whether it's about, their experience personally, or what they would suggest, you do research on in the meantime, or it could be anything, but you want to have some prepared before, and then also kind of let the conversation flow and develop questions kind of during the interview to ask at the end. So here's a list of some top general interview questions that I have gotten in all of my interviews. I will say this varies greatly depending on the job that you are looking for, especially if you're looking for something technical. A lot of times they'll ask about your experience and your knowledge. But a lot of times I've had a lot of interviews that start with, tell me about yourself. And that one can be really hard to talk about because, it's so open-ended that you don't really know where to start. You don't know what to focus on. Should it be personal? Should it be career focused? Who knows? Definitely always, you want it to be career focused, but as Navia was saying, it's always great to throw in some personal information because that makes you feel more human, and it's something to talk about with them. So that's something that you can practice. When someone asks about yourself, what defines you? What do you really want to talk about? What are your interests, career-wise, personal too, either way. These are ones that would be great to set up a document and write them down and say, what are your strengths and weaknesses? You write out 3 of your strengths, 3 of your weaknesses, and describe why that's the case, where you learned those skills, where you see yourself in 5 years. That's always a really tough one, especially for me to answer, or really anyone, at this point. It can be hard, but definitely get an idea of, okay, maybe I want to be in this kind of role, or I want to be in this focus, or I'm really interested in this career, or I want to live here. If you have any idea of what you want to do, you could throw that in there. A time you made a mistake, that's a really big one, and it's a really great one to show humility and show growth and strength in moments that are really challenging. We all make mistakes. And so it's really about how you come back from that mistake and how you can articulate, what that experience was like and what you learned from it. Scenario questions are a really big one. So I mentioned before, in technical interviews, a lot of times they'll do this, but in general, they might say, tell me about a time that your team scenario questions, what if this were to happen, if your team member were to do this, how would you respond? And so kind of seeing how you work and how you think it would be really important to them. And additionally, why you want to work here, as I mentioned before, is always going to be really important. So how this role relates to your career goals and what you hope to learn from this role is going to really show them that you are interested and really invested in getting that job. And of course, explaining your previous experiences, this is really helpful, and developing your resume is going to help you do this a lot. So getting that 1 to 2 sentence description of what you did, what you learned, what skill set you got from that role is really going to help you explain why you're the best person for that role. And so these are some I would highly recommend just jotting down notes as you prepare for that interview. And when it comes time to talking about yourself, it's going to flow a little bit better because you're going to have, thought about all these ideas beforehand. So imposter syndrome and mindset. So imposter syndrome is really when you don't feel prepared for the role that you're applying to, you don't feel like you belong in that situation. And this is something that happens to all of us. Regardless of age, regardless of what job you're applying to, if you're pushing yourself and you're challenging yourself, you're always going to feel a little bit uncomfortable. And that's just kind of the reality of challenging yourself. You're never going to feel like you perfectly line up for a role. And so that's okay. And that's normal. And what you want to do is don't be afraid of that challenge, and don't be afraid of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone to apply to jobs that feel a little bit out of reach for you, because that's where the magic happens, I would say. So apply to jobs that you might not be perfectly qualified for on paper. A lot of times the interviews are your chance to prove it to someone, and someone will take a chance on you, especially in entry-level roles. And maintaining a healthy mindset is always really important as well. So, we've all been in the position where you apply to a job that you're really passionate about, and that's great to be really passionate about that job, but you don't want to put all of your emotional eggs in one basket and then you're devastated if you don't get it. It's really important to, keep going and keep applying and looking for things that you are passionate about and that really excite you. And it'll make the interview process a little bit less daunting each time you go into an interview. Not everything is riding on this one interaction. It's really hard to judge people by one interaction. So just keep that in mind as you go through. And additionally, develop a routine or workflow for applying. And I would say this is really important for, maintaining your mindset. So when you have a workflow for creating your resume or writing your cover letter, or kind of keeping things the same each time, so you're not spending an outrageous amount of time developing that each job, that can really help you manage your time and your mindset. And then additionally, avoid comparing yourself to others or asking about other candidates, because it should be just focused on you and what you can give to the role. And the employer also should not bring that up. It's just not a professional thing to do. And it's irrelevant. This interview should be about you and them and the mutual best fit from there. So follow-ups and manners, this is a really important part of kind of ending the interview, and after that process, following up is really important. So it's important to leave a good impression and show that you care. And the ways that you can do that are first, if you're in a one-on-one interview or a group interview, remember the names of your interviewers, and if possible, ask for their contacts. It could be just their email if you don't already have it. And that's really helpful because then you can send a thank you to them after about, thanking them for their time. It could be if they have, after the interview process, if you get rejected or anything like that, you can always ask for kind of referrals or just, let me know what I should do better next time. It's not a one and done deal. It's always great to talk to them afterwards and kind of get more out of the interaction because, you can always learn something from every interview you go into. And then additionally, whenever you go into an interview and afterwards, you're really wanting to know an answer right away, it usually takes them a little bit of time to deliberate, to interview other candidates. So don't feel the need, and I would recommend not to keep reaching out to them or to, keep saying, have you made a decision or things like that. It's going to appear a little bit unprofessional if that happens. You want to respect their time and respect their process. And if they give you a time period, which usually they'll say, you'll hear it back in about 2 weeks or so, respect that time period and then ask if you haven't heard back by then, just saying, hey, just checking in. I'm still really excited about the role, but just make sure not to pressure too much. I would also say handle rejection gracefully. This is way easier said than done. It always really hurts to not get a job that you're passionate about. And we've all been there. But I'd say, thank them for their time. They really went out of their way to put the time into this and ask you these questions. And so again, ask to keep in touch if possible and ask if you can connect with anyone else. That's going to make you appear a really graceful person. And I think that it's going to make it a lot easier on you emotionally to kind of, be upset for a little bit and then kind of get over it and see what you can use that experience for. And additionally, I would say don't be afraid to apply to a different role at the company or the same role during a different hiring cycle. It's definitely not a bad thing to do, and it shows that you're interested in the company itself and what they stand for. And so I've done that with a bunch of different jobs that I've been looking for. And even if you don't get them, again, you learn a lot more each time that you do an interview. So evaluating a mutual best fit. So what interviewers owe you when it comes to an interview, I mentioned this in the beginning, but it should be a two-way street. It's a conversation and it's definitely for you as much as it is for the employer. So you want to find a place where you feel welcomed, encouraged to grow, where it really feels nice to be there. And when you have someone looking out for your best interests. So whether that's your boss or a colleague that you talk to, you really want to just kind of have that gut feeling that it feels like a good place to work. So some good signs to tell if that's the case. If the interviewer is eager to tell you about employee perks or programs or structured learning opportunities, especially when it comes to internships, that's a really good sign. So a lot of times you'll go into an internship and they have a full program where they have speakers that come in, or they have, learning Wednesdays where you have lunch and learn about a different topic, whatever it may be. That's a really great sign because they've put time and money into this program for internships specifically. And for internships, you really want to kind of get a clear explanation of what you'll get out of the experience. So you want to know, some things could be up in the air, but you really want to have an idea of what they're going to ask you to do, or what you can expect of your boss, basically. So again, interviews should feel like more like a conversation. And if that's happening, you'll kind of feel it. You'll feel the natural flow of the conversation and you'll feel engaged. And I think it's going to be a more enjoyable experience when it is a conversation. You can kind of feel if it gets robotic or awkward, or you don't really know what to ask, or they don't know what to ask. That's not always a bad sign, but sometimes it could just be nerves. But sometimes that can be a great way to tell as well. Some red flags that you can look out for in interviews. Definitely any biased, irrelevant, or uncomfortable interview questions. So there are protected characteristics, like you should not ever have to answer a question about your gender or about your sexual orientation or about, if you were pregnant or not, or anything like that is irrelevant, and so you shouldn't have to answer questions like that, nor should it be really on the table in the discussion, as well as discussing other candidates. Again, really not super professional. And so it's really should be focused on you the whole time and your relationship with that company. And then unpaid internships, there are a lot of these out there and they're not always a bad thing, but I would say a lot of times unpaid internships are not structured in the sense that your learning is prioritized. And so that's something you want to look out for. Most internships, I would say, that I've applied to are paid, and it's really great to get something, at least a stipend, out of your internship. But I would just caution you to be careful in that instance, because they really legally have to give you that learning experience, especially if it's an unpaid internship. So they shouldn't just be throwing you anything that they don't want to do. That's where the difference lies there. And unclear salary guidelines, if they don't really know what they're going to pay you, or they're kind of, not answering your question directly about that, that can sometimes be a red flag. And then a general lack of interest. If they don't really seem interested in you or in your answers to questions, sometimes that could be just, an unfortunate interview pairing, but that's always a good way to kind of gauge, are they passionate about the company? Is this a great place to work for you? So you can kind of feel that out there. And then kind of to wrap up, some overall interview tips. So strategies, these are some that I mentioned earlier, but just to reiterate, I always recommend framing any weaknesses that they ask about as opportunities for growth, and avoid any kind of general run-of-the-mill responses. So I listed one here. My weakness is that I care too much, or I'm a perfectionist, or things like that. It's fine, but I would say it's not really creative, or not really kind of talking about yourself specifically, and might show that you haven't totally prepared for that question or what you want to answer. So I'd say try to come up with a more unique response about yourself and really tie it to some of your experiences as well. And additionally, never badmouth a former employer. That generally tends to look bad, because then they don't know if you're going to do that about them as well. So just avoid doing that. Even if it ended in, kind of an unfortunate situation, just kind of leave that part aside. And definitely be the person that you'll want to be at work. So try not to put up a facade, which is hard to do when you're nervous. You start to kind of put up a wall, and all of us do that, but try to be natural and try to show your true self. Just because, if you're lying on your resume or lying in the interview, they're going to find out about it, because they're going to know your skills when you start to work there, and you shouldn't have to fit in. You should just be able to come in as yourself and definitely rise to the challenge. It's always going to be a challenge, but you should never have to lie to get a job. And then again, lastly, don't be afraid to take a second and think when someone asks you a question. You don't always have to have an answer right away. And in fact, it definitely shows that you're considering the question and that you're really taking it seriously and really want to formulate a thoughtful answer if you're taking a second to think. It also gives you some time to breathe and just kind of calm down, and maybe calm down your nerves as well. So take that time, that you need during that interview. And that is most of what I have to say about any interview tips and advice for going through the process. We will move into questions for our team. So it can be about, anything I shared, David shared, or Navia shared as well. So I'll stop sharing this.
So it looks like we got a question in the chat earlier from Sammy. The question was, how do you phrase a message when reaching out to people for a referral/coffee chat? If the person is someone I haven't talked to in years. So I can take that first, and then after that, anyone else can jump in. I think it depends on what your relationship was with that person. So for my job, I can copy paste what I messaged the person. I had worked pretty closely with them. I had also not talked to them in a couple of years, but when I did work with them, we worked very closely together. So I made it a little more casual. Here, one second. Yeah, it's definitely a little more casual than if it was someone I didn't know at all. I include a smiley face at the end, stuff like that. So again, definitely depends on what your relationship is with this person. I also made a very simple template that you could also potentially use. I think it's really important to make it personal, especially if this is someone that you used to know. Or that you do know, just making sure that you're including some of those personal details, and don't make it seem super transactional, if that makes sense. Obviously, a referral is what you want, or a coffee chat is what you want, but I guess just make sure wording isn't super transactional, and that you seem oh, I just want this from you, and that's it.
Cool.
I think we also have a couple other questions in the form, and I'll just read them out. So what is the process like? What was the process like for obtaining your current job? Did you have to do multiple interviews, write a cover letter, take any tests, etc.?
I can start this one. So again, my current job, I'm a medical scribe, which is, someone that kind of dictates or writes out the dictation from the physician when you're in the patient room. So I'm a scribe and an assistant at a private practice here in San Francisco. And the listing for the job itself was actually through a forum/website called Handshake, which is a partnership with a lot of different colleges across the United States, but basically it's a great way to sort of look for jobs at internships. So I found this posting, I applied to it. I think at the time of applying, it was just like a quick application where you throw in like a resume, maybe a cover letter. And then a few weeks later, I got an email from one of the managers that works in the HR department saying, hey, like we're interested in considering you for the position. Could you fill out this paperwork? So the paperwork was kind of like general introduction bio type stuff. I kind of reiterated a lot of stuff on my resume that was more specific to the role. And then also because I was applying for a scribe position, they also had me do like a words per minute test. So they had me sign up for this thing where I had to type out some stuff for a few minutes, I think, and it generated my WPM. So that was more relevant to the job. That was like the only test I had to do. And then I had a Zoom interview with one woman from HR, as well as the person that I was supposedly like taking over the job for. So they kind of interviewed me. They did more like general questions, very similar questions that Sarah was talking about. And then they asked me more specific stuff like, oh, like, what's your experience working with patients? Or what would you do in a difficult situation if a patient were to, and then XYZ situation. So overall, it was a very like laid back, casual interview, I guess. And then a couple of weeks later, they invited me to an in-person interview, which I thought was going to be an actual interview with the doctor. So the doctor that I would be scribing and assisting for, but it ended up just kind of being like a chat with the doctor. Like he asked me questions about myself, but it was honestly more like just talking to him. So I think that moment was one of the moments where I realized that it was a really nice work environment. This is also what Sarah was talking about. Like you can kind of feel it immediately if they're a good fit for you, if it's a good work environment for you, if it's a collaborative work environment where the staff really care for one another. And that's really what I got throughout the entire experience. So I thought that was really cool. I also wanted to include, since we were talking about doing tests and stuff, prior to that in college, when I was applying to labs, the lab that I ended up working for, the PI, the principal investigator, did send me like a biology test sort of to take. I think it was about 10 questions or so of like dilution questions or different like bio lab technique type questions, but I didn't get a perfect score on it, of course, but it was actually really nice because the PI ended up going over through the results with me and told me what I could do better and things like that. So don't be afraid of any tests and things they throw out your way. I think you're expected to not do 100% great on them, but just kind of do your best.
Cool. And I think just for the purposes of time, this will be the last question. I'm having trouble getting a response back from jobs, aka I keep getting ghosted. How many jobs did you apply to before hearing back? Any tips for hearing back? I can take this one. I definitely did have that experience, and I'm sure everyone else on this call did as well, just like not getting responses. And I think I touched on it a lot in my section, kind of just changing up the strategy a little, making sure that you're not just blindly going through this process and you're kind of just, throwing darts and hoping something sticks. Really being deliberate with your job search, and really making those, trying to make those more personal connections with people related to your job search, whether it be the recruiter or people that you could potentially get a referral from, things like that. I think really helped me really turn it around. It definitely, like, those two things were the main things that helped me get, my internship and my job. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, like David mentioned, for the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. But if you do have, as we go through these ending slides, if you do have more questions, please email us. We would love to answer your questions or set up a call with you to learn more. So I'll have some contact information at the end. But first, just to let you know, we do have an advice blog. So if you have a question and you're looking for our take on, anything under the moon, whether it be breaking down the common application essay prompts that you see here, semester versus quarter system, finding research opportunities, letters of recommendation, we've written about everything, college focused, job focused. So please feel free to check that out on our website. And you can also suggest future blog topics that you want to hear about. So if you want to take a screenshot of this link here, you can submit to our form as well. And then we also have a newsletter and social media account. So feel free to follow us on Instagram, look to our website, go to LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, email, all that good stuff. Feel free to save this information as well. So you can reach out to us with questions, or if you want to learn more about our services at Study Hall College Consulting. And lastly, just want to thank you for attending. So since you were here till the end, if you're here live, you can submit to this form to receive 10% off of your next purchase with Study Hall College Consulting. And if you or any of your friends want to watch this again, we will be posting this to our YouTube, so you can watch this webinar again or pass it along. And so all of this was recorded, so you can hear all of this, a second time. So again, thank you for joining us. And with that, we hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. Thanks so much.